My name is Daniel Kessler. For 18 years, I poured everything I had into one place, NetWarrion Systems. I wasn't the loudest in meetings. I didn't play office politics or post weekly LinkedIn sermons about thought leadership. I showed up early, stayed late, and made sure everything worked. When I started, NetWarrion was a cramped co-working space with spotty Wi-Fi and four stressed-out founders arguing over JavaScript syntax. I helped take them from startup chaos to enterprise stability. I built their infrastructure. I rewrote their architecture. Twice. I designed the entire licensing model they later sold to investors as proprietary innovation. 18 years. And then one Tuesday morning, after our usual sprint review, the new CTO, Chad 32, fresh from some fintech darling, pulled me into a breakout room and said, "Daniel, you're not adaptable enough for where we're going." That was it. No performance review. No warning. Just a sentence. He said it with a kind of rehearsed sympathy, like he'd practiced sounding disappointed in someone who had just outlived their usefulness. I nodded. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. Because I already knew. They had no idea what they were letting go. Not adaptable enough. That phrase rang in my ears long after Chad left the room. It echoed not because it hurt, but because it was laughable. In 18 years, I hadn't just adapted. I had rebuilt their core system from the ground up. 3 times. The first version collapsed under its own weight after we signed our first enterprise client. I stayed in the office for 72 hours straight to save the contract. Redesigned the entire queue structure, wrote new deployment logic from scratch, and turned chaos into consistency. The second version came when our user base tripled in 6 months. They wanted real-time analytics, cross-platform integrations, dynamic provisioning. No one else could figure it out. I did. By teaching myself container orchestration long before it became industry standard. The third? That came after a devastating DOS attack. We were down for 6 hours. The board panicked. I didn't. By the end of the week, we had a smarter, self-healing infrastructure that not only blocked the attack but learned from it. The CTO at the time called it the most elegant piece of engineering he had ever seen. And now this kid, Chad, with his perfectly ironed startup hoodie and a portfolio full of jargon, was telling me I couldn't adapt. He didn't know I'd spent the last 2 years rewriting our legacy licensing system into a modular framework, the same system they were currently pitching as AI-driven SaaS deployment. He didn't know because he never asked. None of them did. They thought adaptability meant using the latest buzzword, not solving the deepest problems. I didn't say any of this. I just packed my things, silently. But I took one thing with me that no one else had even noticed, a legal document, signed years ago, and about to change everything. Chad came in with the kind of swagger you only get from leading one lucky product at one lucky startup. He called himself a visionary, talked about disrupting legacy systems and injecting fresh blood into the company culture. He scheduled walking meetings, brought in standing desks, installed idea whiteboards in the hallways like we were in some Netflix original about innovation. And within his first 30 days, he fired 2 senior back-end engineers, reshuffled product leads, and invited everyone to redo their job descriptions under his new Agile First framework. But firing me, that was his power move. See, I didn't resist his arrival. I stayed quiet. I observed. Because I'd seen this before, the new leader who wants to make a name by cutting down the pillars that hold the place up. To someone like Chad, I wasn't an asset. I was an artifact, a reminder of the old ways. Too calm, too proven, too respected by the people who actually built things. He wanted energy, not history. Flash, not foundation. So he sacrificed me to make room for his people. Younger hires with big resumes and zero context. And the board applauded. Because people like Chad speak the language they want to hear. Scale, modernization, and velocity. Never mind that none of his dashboards could even run without the systems I personally wrote line by line. They let me go under the illusion of evolution. But what they didn't realize was this. They didn't just remove a developer. They removed the only person who truly understood how the company functioned. And while Chad was drawing triangles on glass walls, I was walking out the front door with something far more valuable than a severance check. I expected at least a conversation, Some kind of debrief, 18 years of loyalty and not even a formality, but there was no exit interview, no handshake, no parting words from leadership, just an automated email from HR. Your credentials will expire at 5 p.m. Please return your badge and company-issued devices to the front desk. That was it. The receptionist looked up at me with a sad little smile. She'd only been there a month. She had no idea who I was. No idea that the back-end system managing her check-in workflow was built by the man handing over the badge. I left quietly, no scene. Not because I was defeated, but because I was prepared. What no one in that office knew was that months earlier, I'd had a conversation with our legal department. Back then, we were preparing to license a component of our platform to a government agency. The lawyers had concerns about IP ownership, so we audited all contributing systems. That's when I discovered something odd. A clause buried in an old internal framework contract I drafted during the second rebuild, when the company was still too small to afford outside counsel. It stated, all proprietary logic modules authored and implemented by the architect, unless otherwise assigned, remain under his intellectual property unless purchased by the company through written agreement. I had forgotten I even wrote it, but it had never been nullified, never amended, never challenged. And now it still stood. The systems they were running, the core of their product, the real engine under the dashboard, were still legally mine. So while they celebrated their restructure, I walked out with the only thing that truly mattered: control. While everyone thought I was leaving with just a cardboard box and a bruised ego, I was leaving with something far more powerful: a signed, time-stamped, company internal license agreement, drafted by me, reviewed by legal, approved by a long-gone COO. The printout had been sitting in my home filing cabinet for over a decade. Back then, it was just a formality, something I put in place during a critical system rebuild when the company was still figuring out what ownership even meant. No one paid much attention to it, but I did. It clearly stated that unless a system module or architectural design was explicitly purchased or reassigned in writing, I retained licensing rights as the original architect. They never purchased anything. They assumed that because I built it while employed, they automatically owned it. But assumptions don't hold up in court. The software they built their revenue on, the licensing engine, the priority routing logic, the adaptive client allocation scripts, all rested on core systems I had created independently, without instruction, using tools and strategies outside my original scope of employment. In other words, the idea was mine, the method was mine, and without a signed transfer agreement, the rights were mine too. I had kept quiet all these years because I never needed to say anything. But now, with Chad at the wheel and the system beginning to sputter under his modernizations, I realized something. They might have erased my name from the org chart, but they couldn't erase it from the foundation of everything they ran. And now that I was gone, that foundation was cracking. 2 days after I left, I checked the company's investor page. Just curiosity, I told myself. Front and center was a flashy new pitch deck uploaded by Chad. The title? Scaling Smarter, NetWareOn's Adaptive Licensing Framework. I clicked through. Slide 3 featured a colorful flowchart, a stripped-down version of a system I had designed, optimized, and deployed 5 years earlier. Slide 6 had a tagline: 100% in-house innovation. I almost laughed. What they were showcasing, what Chad was proudly taking on a roadshow to impress VCs, was my logic, my configuration, and in large part, my code. None of it had been bought. None of it had been reassigned. It still operated under the original modular license structure that required annual renewal and formal agreement, which they never did. They didn't just lean on my work. They built everything on top of it. Their growth model, their investor appeal, their sales strategy, all of it rested on the assumption that the underlying system was theirs to own, scale, and sell. But it wasn't. It was licensed, not transferred. And when I left, so did that license's validity. That system had a heartbeat, a core engine, and it wasn't built to run without its architect's blessing. They thought they had secured the future. In reality, they had constructed their entire business model on sand. All I had to do was wait for the tide to come in. And it was coming. Most companies think disaster comes from outside. A cyber attack, a market crash, a scandal. But in NetWarion's case, it came from a single sentence. One clause buried in a contract they never fully read. I remember writing it during the second infrastructure rebuild. We were understaffed, overworked, and running without formal legal review. Leadership gave me broad authority to handle the technical side. So I did, with precision. Tucked into page 12 of the framework agreement was a clause that read, all proprietary architectural modules and logic authored by the architect shall remain licensed to NetWareon systems under a non-exclusive, revocable agreement unless expressly transferred by signed amendment. One sentence, 17 words. A quiet bomb with a delayed fuse. For years, that clause sat untouched, unnoticed, unenforced, because I never needed to use it. I was there, maintaining the system, improving it, supporting it, but now I wasn't. And the moment I stepped away, the system defaulted into technical violation. They no longer had an active license. They were running my architecture illegally. They had no idea. Until the first legal notice landed on Chad's desk, a formal notice of license revocation from my consulting LLC, signed, dated, and supported by federal records of IP ownership. Claire, one of the few engineers who still respected me, messaged me privately. You broke them with one paragraph. I hadn't broken anything. I had just enforced what was already true. They thought silence meant surrender. But I was never silent out of weakness. I was silent because I knew exactly what was coming. 3 weeks after I left, I received a message on LinkedIn. It was from Ethan, the intern. The same intern Chad had praised during the last team all hands. The same intern he told everyone was the kind of adaptable talent we need going forward. The message was polite, almost nervous. Hi, Daniel. Hope you're doing well. Sorry to bother you, but I'm trying to access the core configuration panel, and I think I'm missing the admin credentials. Could you possibly point me in the right direction? No subject line, no signature, just a quiet digital knock at my door. I stared at the screen for a while. This was the person they gave my job to, the one they believed could carry on the system I had spent nearly 2 decades building. And now he was asking me, off the record, how to get in. I didn't respond, not because I wanted to punish him. He was just a kid caught in a power game he didn't understand. But I wasn't going to be their crutch anymore. They made their decision. They replaced experience with enthusiasm, depth with energy, comprehension with charisma. And now they were drowning in the complexity I had always shielded them from. The admin credentials weren't the real problem. The problem was that the new team didn't even know what they didn't know. There were no shortcuts, no cheat sheets. The system required knowledge earned through failure, repetition, and hours no one saw. And now that I was gone, there was no one left who truly understood how the thing breathed. I didn't reply to Ethan. I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and let the silence speak for itself. By the end of the month, cracks weren't just forming, they were spreading. I didn't need insider updates. I could see it happening in real time, just by watching NetWarion's public support forums. Customers started posting complaints. Our usage reports are missing. Auto renewals aren't triggering. Support hasn't answered in 48 hours. The very systems they had once praised as bulletproof were now misfiring in plain sight. And the team? They were scrambling. Claire, bless her, messaged me again. We've missed 3 major client deadlines. 2 integrations failed. Chad's having daily stand-ups just to calm people down. It didn't surprise me. They had tried to inject speed into a system that was built for precision. Tried to strip down complexity they never understood in the first place. See, when you build something intricate, something living, you don't just hand it off like a file folder. You need to hand over understanding. And Chad hadn't even asked. He ripped out scripts he called redundant, replaced stable modules with flashy microservices that looked good in investor demos, but collapsed under pressure. One client emailed NetWarion's support team after their entire analytics dashboard went dark for 6 hours. No one knew why, but I did. They'd bypassed the event throttling protocol I wrote 5 years earlier, the one that silently distributed traffic during peak loads. It was gone now, deleted probably by someone chasing efficiency, and the system responded exactly as I knew it would, with failure. One small oversight at a time, they were dismantling a machine they didn't understand, a machine that had taken me years to fine-tune, sometimes one sleepless night at a time. They thought I was too slow, too traditional, too rigid. Now they were bleeding deadlines, clients, and money, and all I had to do was watch it unfold. It happened on a Tuesday morning, ironically the same day of the week I'd been let go. At 9:13 a.m., NetWarion's entire client portal went dark. Not just slow, offline, billing, reporting, licensing, everything gone. I got the news from a friend at a partner firm. He messaged me, one word, down. I checked their status page, a clean, clinical banner at the top. We are currently investigating an unexpected outage affecting all regions. All regions. I knew exactly what had happened before I even saw the code. They'd tripped a logic bomb, unintentionally. During my last rebuild, I had implemented a self-isolating failsafe. It was designed to detect recursive overload from misconfigured microservices, the kind of overload that could melt a system from the inside. If triggered, it would shut down the architecture automatically to prevent data corruption. It was elegant, essential, and only 2 people had known how to reset it. One of them was me. The other, retired, 3 years ago. So for 11 hours, NetWarion scrambled. They couldn't reboot from backups. The new system Chad put in place didn't align with the legacy failsafe. They couldn't route around the damage. The new intern had decommissioned the fallback nodes. And worst of all, they had no license to legally operate the core platform, which meant every hour online during that failure would have put them in even deeper legal jeopardy. So they stayed dark, silent, stuck. When the system finally came back up, after emergency consulting and no doubt an army of lawyers combing through old documentation, the damage was already done. 3 major clients terminated their contracts by the end of the week. Investor confidence plummeted. Support tickets skyrocketed. And Chad? Chad finally stopped smiling in company photos. The first call came the morning after the outage. Unknown number. Area code theirs. I didn't answer. A few hours later, another call. This time it was Claire. She left a message. Her voice sounded strained. Daniel, I know this is awkward, but we're in a bind. Chad wanted me to ask if you'd be open to a quick consult, just to get things stabilized again. Then came the emails, first from IT, then from operations, then from legal, each more carefully worded than the last, each hinting at the same thing. They needed me, not just for help, for survival. The architecture they'd dismissed as outdated had collapsed under their own ignorance. The intern was gone. Claire was exhausted. And Chad? He was quiet now. The man who once told me I lacked the mindset for agile evolution was likely sitting in a windowless office, refreshing inboxes, hoping I'd throw him a rope. But I didn't. Not yet. Because I wasn't angry. I wasn't spiteful. I was simply patient. They had made a choice. They'd spoken their values with action. I wasn't adaptable, they said, so I adapted to life without them. And now they were discovering what I'd always known. You can't remove the foundation and expect the building to hold. I stared at my phone. It buzzed again. Another call. I let it ring. Then I turned the phone over, face down on the desk, and opened my laptop. I had other clients to answer. People who respected the architecture and the architect. It took them 2 more days to realize just how deep the problem went. That's when I received the email. This time not from Chad, not from Claire, but from NetWarion's legal department. Subject line, urgent, licensing clarification and request for discussion. They had finally found it. The clause. The one tucked into a decade-old internal document. The one that said my architectural frameworks, unless explicitly reassigned, were licensed, not transferred. And that license, it was revocable. By me. And I had revoked it the day after I walked out. The email was long, full of corporate language. In light of recent events and upon review of contractual history, it appears there may be an ambiguity regarding current rights to specific framework components. Ambiguity? No, there was nothing ambiguous about it. They hadn't read the fine print. They hadn't respected the architect. And now they were paying for it. Claire messaged me again. Short, almost apologetic. They're in full meltdown. Everyone's asking how this wasn't caught. I didn't reply. Because what would I even say? That I warned them? That I stayed up countless nights making sure the system was resilient? That I protected the company from its own short-sighted decisions time and time again? No, they didn't want to hear that then. But now, with the system on life support, clients leaving, and a legal firestorm brewing, they were ready to listen. They didn't just lose a staff member. They lost the only person who could turn the lights back on. And now, the question wasn't if they'd call again. It was what price I'd name when they did. The offer came by courier, a thick envelope delivered in hand, heavy paper, heavy words. Inside, a formal consulting contract from NetWare on Systems. They were offering me a 6-month engagement, full access, high compensation, and a flattering new title, Executive Systems Advisor. It read like a peace treaty, as if all those years could be patched up with a job title and a decent paycheck. But I didn't need a title, and I certainly didn't need to go back. What I needed, and what I had always wanted, was respect. Not the kind that's written into a job offer, but the kind that comes from knowing you're essential and being treated that way. So instead of signing their contract, I sent an invoice. Plain, precise, final. Consulting services, $950 hour. Minimum retainer, $45,000 upfront. Non-exclusive, no non-compete. License use limited to duration of agreement. All rights reserved. No emotion, no explanation. Just the terms, my terms. 2 hours later, Claire replied to my email. They're panicking. Chad says he has no choice. No, Chad, you had a choice. You made it when you called me outdated. When you erased 18 years of sweat, of silence, of stewardship. And now you were paying not just for my time, but for your ignorance. I didn't need to threaten. I didn't need to gloat. I just had to bill them for every second they never valued before. They agreed within 24 hours, no questions, no red lines, not even a phone call to bargain. Just a simple reply from legal. Terms accepted. Please advise on your availability to begin. I didn't respond right away, not because I wanted to punish them, but because I could. For once, the power wasn't on their side of the table. So I took my time. Finished a morning call with one of my new clients, a startup I'd been advising since I left, people who actually wanted to learn. Then I logged into a clean laptop, opened a new secure workspace, and wrote a 3-line reply. I'll begin at noon tomorrow. Hourly billing starts upon login. Expect results. That was it. The next day, I joined a call with Chad, 2 engineers, and their lawyer. Chad didn't say much. His eyes were tired, his voice cautious. Thanks for joining us, Daniel. We really appreciate you stepping in. I kept it simple. Let's get to work. And within 2 hours, I had stabilized their system. Not just patched it, reclaimed it, reset the fail-safes, recompiled the broken modules, restored client reporting with a few lines of code they hadn't even known existed. They asked how I did it. I didn't answer. Because this wasn't about showing off. It was about rebalancing the scale. They had fired me to save costs. Now they were paying triple just to keep the lights on. They had tried to erase my place in the company. Now they were fully, contractually, and financially dependent on me, on my system, on my structure, on my terms. It's been 6 months since that first invoice. I haven't set foot back inside NetWare. I don't sit in their meetings. I don't attend their innovation retreats or join Slack huddles to brainstorm things I solved years ago, but they still use my system. Every single day. They rely on the architecture they once dismissed, the architecture I once maintained out of loyalty, and now license out of leverage. And they pay me for it, line by line, hour by hour, not because I asked for revenge, but because I wrote the rules, and they never bothered to read them. Chad is still there, quieter now. He doesn't speak of fresh blood anymore. He speaks about stability, compliance, and ensuring continuity. In meetings, he references legacy modules, the very systems he once called outdated. He tells the board they're being refactored, but deep down he knows the truth. They weren't refactored. They were rescued by the man he once pushed out the door. As for me, I work from home, or from the coast, or from wherever I feel like opening my laptop. I choose my clients now. I choose my hours. I choose how much of me they get and what it costs. Because when you build something truly great, truly essential, you don't need a title. You don't need a desk. You just need them to remember. You were the system all along, and now they finally do.